So I'm not quite done with Mega Man Xtreme. I may have lied a little bit last time. But the reason I'm doing this bonus video here is in the final part of the playthrough, if you remember, I did a bit of research into the different takes that people had, different reviewers had on Mega Man Xtreme when it first came out. And one of the things that was mentioned was in the IGN review by Mark Nix. He mentioned that although the game ran fine on the Game Boy Color, it didn't hold up so well on the original Game Boy. And I got curious and I wanted to see how it played, so that's what this little extra video is going to be covering. This is going to be covering the game played with the Game Boy technology. Obviously I'm emulating here, but this does replicate some of the problems that he mentioned in his review. Like, particularly when enemies come on screen and whatnot, but I thought it'd also be kind of interesting to show how this looks graphically on an original Game Boy as well, because I do have quite a soft spot for the grayscale visuals, and that's something that I liked about the classic Game Boy Mega Man games, the fact that they looked really cool. They adapted the art style from the NES games really well into the sort of 4-colour Game Boy look. So I was curious to see how that would hold up here as well. I'm not going to show off this whole cutscene, I'm just leaving a little bit in so you can get a feel for how the profile shots and the just general slightly more detailed sprite work looks, because most of what we see in Game Boy is going to be just, you know, what we saw on the Game Boy Color but with fewer colours. And I will say the title screen really doesn't hold up that well, but then Mega Man title screens have always been pretty basic, all things considered, and I feel like that kind of works for Mega Man's look. I'm not sure what that flashing was all about there, but that happened a few times when playing it on Game Boy Color, and it seems to happen here. It seems to be whenever it's loading something in, and admittedly that wouldn't be quite as big of an issue on an actual Game Boy screen. It's just really noticeable here because, you know, you're watching this either in the little YouTube window or you've full screened it, so it looks a lot more threatening. Maybe not the best word to use, but it looks a lot more intense than it would on a tiny little Game Boy screen at least. But I would say that visually it holds up pretty well in grayscale. It looks really nice, the sprite work, I suppose because the Game Boy Color just changes palettes more so than creating entirely new colour schemes for the most part, that does mean that it translates fairly well. And I seem to recall that if you play a classic Game Boy game on at least the Game Boy Advance, there's a way to switch between palettes. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but I feel like there is a bit of flexibility there. But what I'm showing off here is exactly what Mark Nix mentioned in his review, in that as soon as you get enemies on screen, it makes the whole game chug. Particularly when there were a handful of enemies there, and that is the sort of thing that is gonna put strain on a system. A lot of games that have performance issues tend to have those issues crop up when there's a lot of things going on the screen. That's why you get like the Warriors games have trouble when you're in a field surrounded by enemies that you got mowed down, and it's like there's a sort of cut-off point for where the system can handle it and where it can't. And you kind of expect that with big games like that, but when it's a platformer game and there's like 3 enemies, that's when there's a bit of a problem, and I am seeing from this why Mark Nix brought that up as a problem, and that's something that people would have needed to know, because I would imagine that in 2001, like, maybe most people would have moved on to the Game Boy Color, but there would have still been people who see that it's compatible with the original system and give it a shot. And that really would colour their impressions, no pun intended. That leaves me with a bit of a conundrum how I feel about that, because part of me is under the mindset that I want games to be accessible. I want as many people to be able to enjoy a certain game as like you realistically can. That's why I'm against console exclusives these days. I don't like the idea of you have to buy this one specific expensive console to be able to play a game. Like, I know it's a thing that's gonna happen for business reasons, but I find it's quite limiting. It locks people out of games. This is one thing I do want to bring up real quick, in that there seem to be some weird layering things going on. As far as I recall, when I came here on the Game Boy Color version, you couldn't actually see that heart tank. It was obscured by something, but it seems like there was some layering stuff going on. And that is a thing that happens sometimes between Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. I seem to recall that Pokemon in Koga's Gym had a similar thing, where if you play it on the Game Boy Color, you can see where the invisible walls are. There's a soft outline. But yeah, I kind of like to think that as many people should be able to access a game as is realistically possible. But when it comes to obvious technical limitations like we have here, it makes me worry that people who play it like this, people who were playing it on the original Game Boy or the Game Boy Pocket, they probably wouldn't have enjoyed this game that much. Because having frame drops as enemies are attacking you, that's not a minor problem. That's something that genuinely messes up the flow of gameplay. Like, look at this right here, as you got this moving enemy and you got the metals. And look how slow we're dashing along there. Like, that, it's not unplayable, but it's not exactly pleasant either. So, it's not really making the Mega Man Xtreme experience accessible. It's making sort of a nerfed version accessible. And I feel like if you played it like this, if this was your first impression of Mega Man Xtreme, you probably wouldn't enjoy it that much, at least not as much as you would if you played it on the Game Boy Color. And we're sort of getting situations like this now with, say, the PS4 and the PS4 Pro, where there's certain games where it's a much better experience on the Pro, and I kind of feel like I did miss out playing games like, say, the Shadow of the Colossus remake on the base PS4, because it's like I have to settle for the 30 FPS version rather than how Bluepoint intended for it to be played at 60. It feels like I'm getting a lesser experience that they were kind of obligated to give us. But at the same time, in that situation, if it's between that or not being able to play it at all, I am still glad I got to experience it. So I'm not really sure where I stand, and this is only a short video, but I kind of wanted to show this and kind of put that out there. And I'm not intending to come back to the game like this, but you know, it's kind of an interesting thing that's lost to time now, because anyone who plays this game now, unless they're explicitly going out their way to play the Game Boy version like I am for curiosity's sake, they're going to play it on Game Boy Color, or they're going to play the 3DS version which plays it as though it's on the Game Boy Color, or they're going to emulate it using a Game Boy Color emulator. So, I don't know, like, it's a problem that's very much lost to time now, but I think it's still something interesting to think about. The fact that sometimes there are these experiences that, while the game itself is preserved, no one's going to look back at this particular way of engaging with the game. But I hope you've enjoyed the playthrough, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.